RAF heavy bombers assist Marshal Konyev's drive into the Reich. The target is Dresden. It was being used to pump German troops into counterattacks against the Russian army not many miles to the east. This strike put a stop to that. The night sky is pitted with aircraft, varicolored target markers, and the newest German attack device, a scarecrow designed to burst and look like a plane exploding after a direct hit. Static electrical discharge caused by intense cold mars these magnificent bombing shots. The day after the RAF strike at Dresden, B-17 bombers of the 8th United States Air Force gave the city a repeat performance. After these attacks, the German overseas news agency said, "This city, hitherto almost untouched, has been carpeted by heavy and super heavy high explosives and incendiaries. Dresden is a heap of ruins. It has been smashed to atoms." Before these attacks, Dresden was planned as a substitute capital in place of Berlin. After this, Hitler will have to look for a substitute for the substitute.
I spin the old man around so that he's facing me and punch him in the face. After so many hours spent doing press-ups on concrete, I barely notice that one of his teeth is embedded in my fist. He's crying, and I think to myself, look at the hippie crying. Boo-hoo-hoo. Physical abuse is always emotional. Emotional abuse is not always physical. That's why it's best to keep them mixed up. That's what the British understood when they bombed Dresden. Suffocation is the perfect balance between emotional and physical pain. I release the choke. The hippie spits blood all over the floor. I make a point out of laughing at him. I make a laugh out of pointing at him. To be dominated physically is to be crushed emotionally. I read to the hippie from the Bible for an hour. Because loath as he is to admit it, his whole worldview is built upon it. I ask him about his job. And he tells me in words smothered by phlegm and bile that he's a primary school teacher. Jackpot, I think. Habitual Labour voter too, I bet. Community volunteer and weekend smiler. Committed recycler and denim wearing cheese enthusiast. Sickening, isn't it? How cocky can you get? I stamp on his fingers, and then with added vigour on his knuckles, I hear his hand snap somewhere in the middle. Won't be helping any old ladies across the road now, will you? Cunt. I hang myself in front of him and go out knowing that no one will ever find him in time. As it fades to gasping black, I am assured of one last victory, even as the aggressor I died first. These are the kind of fantasies I've been having my whole life. Until I was 20, I was convinced that somehow people would be able to read it in my face. But eventually I realised that no one has any idea what's going on inside my head. Nowadays I can be having a staring contest with a 4-year-old while thinking about bludgeoning a neighbour to death with his own elbow. and not even break a sweat. My problems start with the fact that the sky is up and the ground is down. They start with 1 + 1 = 2, and continue throughout the many strains of our so-called society. Sanity is a sickness perpetuated by the criminally insane. Maths is a form of black magic. Regression and progression are two sides of the same coin, spinning in a pool of spilt beer and spit. Inevitably, the whole world is moving closer to an absence of anything. The human being who has the pleasure of witnessing the apocalypse will most likely be an imbecile who has spent their short life amusing themselves by sticking their finger in their own shit and then tasting it. How can I go to shopping centres with thoughts like that? It's indecent. It makes me feel like I'm walking around naked with an erection. Out of place. On edge. Like I said, indecent. My doctor is giving me a kind of test. He hits each of my kneecaps with a cricket bat and makes me drink milky tea while reciting the national anthem backwards. I don't know the words to the national anthem, and I'm lactose intolerant. This is a dream that it took me a week of trying to have. I'm a bit older now, and all that hate has been tempered by long shifts and blisters. Nowadays, I think there is a possibility that pick-and-mick politics can change the consistency of the soil. No way. What was it? The ice cap's melting. Yeah, that's right. You know when you need to defrost your freezer, and you have to eat everything. Think about that next time you want to vote Green. And what's all this shit about sex being less sad and lonely than masturbation? Did you hear the one about the two people who spent their whole time exalting friction and sweat? Fucking is asking. Wanking is answering. Spinning on a merry-go-round, driving in endless circles at a roundabout, reciting your shopping list, overthrowing your government. somewhere in an industrial estate, on the edge of a town long since forgotten but not a stone's throw from the motorway services, the one with the Burger King staffed by Chinese immigrants. A man absent-mindedly strums at a guitar. He's got a headache and he wants to go to sleep. He was up all night reading Aleister Crowley and learning the riffs to Sabbath songs. He's got a spot on the end of his nose. And he will never do anything unique in his entire life because everything of any interest has already happened. This is the come down. We are living in the come down after the great orgy of fucking and killing and moral certainty that came before. Feeling unsure of what you think, eating a takeaway. It's the first week of November and the Christmas lights have gone up. And me and the homeless man who used to live in the public toilets are both throwing up in the multi-storey car park. He's throwing up because he had 2 cans of special brew for breakfast. I'm throwing up because I find the way the Christmas lights hang from lamppost to lamppost, guilt-tripping me into smiling, sickening. It's somewhat obscene, and I don't like the anxious sound of money either. In fact, to make it so cerebral is dishonest. It's more like an allergy. My whole life I've found things like Christmas lights nauseating. Things like Christmas lights and wedding dresses, and freshly cut lawns, and small brown bowls of potpourri, and legislation, and tourist attractions, and phone-in TV shows and rom-coms, and those big books that people have on coffee tables in middle-class houses, and elections. The list goes on, and on, and on. I feel the vomit coming back up my throat again and I bend over. The homeless man is patting me on the back. His breath smells like sick and synthesized supermarket spirits. I hear him say, "I've got a son and a daughter I haven't seen for 13 years. My granddad passed away. I felt sad, even though he was old and by all measurements lived a pretty okay life. I'm walking around the garden with his second wife. She's pointing out flowers to me and telling me their proper names. Their lawn is very carefully trimmed. She's telling me that towards the end of his life, my grandfather worried that the world wasn't getting any better. That for most of his life he'd felt like the human race was moving forward. But towards the end, he really felt the opposite. I said he was probably right. What I really thought was that he was probably wrong all along. The human race was never getting better, never moving forward. Better implies a capacity for individual change of which humans are not capable. The only real power is structure, and the only real change is a reordering of that structure. A rejigging is in order. Get the guillotine back out. Under the paving stones, more paving stones, this time made from compressed bone. My granddad's second wife turns to me and says, "Aren't the flowers pretty? It's a shame that they have to exist in such an ugly world." I nod my head and I think to myself, just imagine if you didn't even find flowers pretty. Two men are standing under a lamppost. The light doesn't flicker like in the movies. One of the men smokes, and the other one bites his nails and spits the bits of skin and nail onto the street. The man who's smoking takes a plastic bag out of his inside pocket and unwraps it. Inside the bag is a gun.
It looks old.
It is old.
Does it work?
Yes.
Did you try it?
No, but trust me, it works.
Trust me is the type of thing people say when they aren't to be trusted.
It works.
So we're going to do this?
Yes, we are. Who's shooting?
Does it matter?
Yes, it matters.
It only matters that he dies.
It took the professor's wife a while to recognize her husband. The bullet had made a hole in his face where most of his recognizable features used to be. She nodded, and the policeman put the sheet back over her husband's body.
We think that one of the attackers was injured in the attack.
Why?
We believe that the weapon exploded in the attacker's hand when he tried to fire a second shot. We've identified matter that doesn't belong to your husband.
Matter?
Blood.
Then why don't you say blood?
Matter's a technical term.
Does that mean you'll find him?
Him? Why are you so sure it's a him?
Aren't you?
If we have his DNA on file, we'll be able to identify the perpetrator. Did your husband have any enemies?
He'd received threats recently.
What type of threats?
Relating to his work. They were strange letters, almost like stories.
How was your husband employed?
He was a professor of economics.
I lean back in the bath and watch the water becoming pink and cloudy. Underwater, the damage isn't so easy to see. It almost looks deliberate, the two fingers missing like that. He's standing in the doorway smoking.
Do you think it was worth it?
These things are hard to quantify. History only moves in one direction. Who can say? Maybe the Allies would have won without destroying Dresden, but we'll never know, so we keep on acting like it was necessary. I feel faint.
I'll call an ambulance.
Don't.
I'm scared.
Can you turn on the TV? I want to watch the news.
Of course.
After he left, I lay there and listened to them say my name over and over again on the television. They said my name. And then they said, murderer.